guys need to call your meeting.
Mr. Chair?
I guess we'll call our meeting to order.
Second.
All right, thank you. And first off, I want to thank you all for taking the time to come out tonight. And I think I can speak on behalf of all the Middleton reps that we do appreciate your attendance and just your willingness to have a conversation with us about our capital plan. And I'd like to thank the video staff so people at home can take a look at this later whenever they want to. And just to give a bit of a rundown, for the past few years, Masco has been working towards bringing a capital plan to fruition. The physical condition of Masconomet is not well. Even though the building looks clean, we're having some difficulties on the inside and on the roof. Our roof, HVAC system, and building management system are at the end of their useful life. We've had a rooftop unit catch on fire. The heavy rains have been creating many leaks in our roof. And our boiler in the middle school is currently 50 years old. Our building management system is so old that the new system we're gonna put in won't be compatible with it and it won't work correctly. So the committee has put off the capital improvements due to COVID, but now that we're on the other side of COVID, it's time that we start having a conversation of asking the towns to support us in our effort to address the capital needs of the district. And we understand that this is gonna take all three towns and we wanna earn all three town supports, and we can't do that without all of you, all the voters, and we're looking forward to starting the educational campaign as we get this underway here. So with that, Matt was on the District Capital Improvement Committee, so I'll hand it over to him, but if you guys wanna introduce yourselves, feel free.
Yeah, sure. I'm Kendra Petroni, and again, just mirror what Trevor said. Thank you for coming here. And for me, my biggest pet peeve, and it's my daily job, is communication. So for me, my biggest worry is if anybody's ever concerned that they're not getting the information that they want or that they need to be able to make informed decisions. So for me, that's my biggest pet peeve and issue. So whatever I need to do or we need to do to get the necessary information to make this work or to get the right data or reports or numbers to you to be able to, for you to be able to make, you know, the correct decision is a big for me. I don't ever want anybody to think their input isn't going to be valued. That's not how I operate. I don't think that's how any of us operate. So I really do appreciate you guys making time for this because it's very important to me. I know it's very important to them as well that we get you what you need to have the right information for all of this, for the projects that we have coming up. So thank you again for coming and for your patience with us explaining all of this. So.
Yeah, my name is Matt Alexander. I'm also in my rookie season here on the school committee with Kendra. I'll mimic that, right? Thank you guys for your time tonight. I think we'll have a fruitful dialogue. I'm not in communications. My trade is engineering, so in fact that's kind of against my blood, if you will. But I'll do my best. I'm going to walk you through a presentation that I had put together, and I think this isn't necessarily all-inclusive. It's not going to answer all of your questions. My hope is that it's more of just a guide to help us through a dialogue this evening. So by all means, as I'm going through this, stop, ask questions. If the question's going to be addressed later on, I may put off the question for a few minutes. But again, my hope is that this is going to be a bit of a dialogue as opposed to me presenting charts to you guys, which we do plenty of that in our day jobs. And we are. So I think Trevor kind of summed it up, right? The buildings are in dire need of capital improvements. They've been in dire need for a while now. It's only getting worse, right? And so I've talked to a couple of you recently, and I don't think there's a lot of debate over the state of Masco, the middle school, the high school, the need for a roof, the need to address the leaking through the roof. The roof is at its end of useful life. It's 25 years-ish now, 20 years-ish now, right? And I mean, there's pictures of buckets sitting around the high school collecting water as the rain comes through. The HVAC, as Trevor mentioned, right? I mean, it's failing left and right. There's fires on the roof. They've had sections of the building that have not been able to be serviced by HVAC at times, heating and cooling, and so that is also in dire need, as Trevor mentioned, the building management system. So As we've gone through this process, a lot of the capital improvements have been bucketed into three categories. Category A, as we go through this, has always been the roof, the HVAC, and the building management system, the BMS. And those are, I think, for everybody, top priority, right? Including the administration, I won't speak for all the school committee members, but I think the general consensus is that those are the top priorities. When we started the capital plan work earlier in the school year, the turf fields were also on there. It did not gain a lot of support. I don't know that we ever explicitly voted on something like that, but it didn't gain the support. It was never put into the capital plan that we ended up putting forth and voted on. And so, just maybe to summarize kind of the discussion around the turf fields, there were some folks on the school committee who felt like turf wasn't quite at the position that they had to be at in order to come back to us into the towns for additional support, additional funding. And so we were asking the turf hub committee at the time to continue to go do more work with fundraising and planning. And then capital C was a lot of the smaller projects. When that started off, it was a $10 million bucket. And I think I'm going to talk about this in a couple charts, but by no means was it a bucket of tasks that were going to get accomplished in 1 year. It was a bucket of tasks that were going to get accomplished over a number of years. And we whittled that down. We looked at some of the priority tasks. It went down to $5 million at one point, and then as we ended the sort of cycle of budget planning, it got down to $1 million. And so we were certainly fiscally conscious as we were going through that category C, making sure that those were projects that were only top priority, knowing that we didn't want to place an additional fiscal burden on top of category A things that were, sort of table stakes, I'd say at this point, to keep the building operationally effective. So in any case, right, we've had a lot of capital meetings. We've had the DCI meetings. We've had regular briefings and outbriefs from the DCI subcommittee at the school committee meetings. We've deliberated, we've voted at the school committee recently, of course on the budget, but also on a building committee that we can talk about tonight as well. And basically the outputs from the vote were to go forth with the initial phase of category A, which was for an owner's project manager, an OPM, as well as the design phase for $5 million. We'll talk about that. And then to actually, it ends up being about $1 million total, but $400K included in this budget this year for category C projects that we felt we could start in this fiscal year.
The process that we're outlining is, trying to address the capital needs, in different years, different asks. Some of these asks will require, override. What's the rationale for not bundling everything so you have one vote? In late 2018, early 2019, the school committee created, the district capital planning task force. It was the 3 DCI members and 1 FinCom or select board member from each town. And the task of that task force was to talk about the capital needs that were identified in the Habib report and to see if we could come to some kind of conclusion as to whether to ask for the money in one ask, several asks, and whatever the timing is. Had some, meetings, and then Kevin Lyons was retiring, Susan Givens was taking another job, and those meetings ceased. then Mike started, after getting his feet wet, COVID hit and everything, sort of shut down for a while.
Yep.
So was there any discussion with anyone on whether to pursue one ask or multiple asks? And if not, how was the decision to make multiple asks reached?
So you're asking between, you're suggesting maybe, you're asking about combining categories and combining things in category C, or?
Identify what the capital needs are, Jeff had presented in January, beginning of February of '23, a plan that had $46 million, which was higher than the Habib, and it covered sort of different things. But the principle, is the same. If you believe that the facility needs $46 million worth, you can ask for it at one time, like we did with the municipal complex. Ask for the money to address all the needs at the same time, or you can go into pieces.
Yep.
And if you go into pieces, there's multiple overrides needed. There are multiple points that you will have to use time to hire OPMs, because you do this project, you have to hire an OPM. Later on, you do a different project, you go through the same process of hiring an OPM, which takes time.
Mhm.
So
Can I take a first cut?
Yeah, go for
All
it.
right, so I think that, to sort of address the first part of the question of why not combine, one of the things we talked about was we did not want to jeopardize the top priorities with a larger bill, right? So we viewed this as, again, we have to get category A done, right? Well, the building is falling apart without category A done. And so,
but you're still risking it, because this $5 million doesn't actually fix anything. It just creates plans. And unless people are willing to vote for the much larger number to actually fix, then they may not vote for the 5.
they may not, right? But I'm not sure we know precisely what so as part of the outcome from phase 1, which is something we'll talk about, right? As part of the outcome from phase 1, you will have the design, you will have the prices, you will have the options for how we could go forth with execution and construction of the roof, the HVAC, and the BMS, right? So, if you came to us today and asked us specifically to the dollar what it's going to cost to build, right? We don't know. We don't know how much it's going to cost to the dollar, right? We don't know the exact options. We don't know about electrification. We don't know about other facets of this project that green efficiency aspects of the project, perhaps, that we may want to look into and may want to consider, that we'll be getting out of this initial phase of the project, right? So we don't know. We don't know if we go for $30 million or $32 million or $27 million or precisely what the number is. But this was step 1 to get the OPM design so we can have an output from that to be able to go and have a precise plan and dollar figure that goes along with that plan. So Trevor, I don't know if you want to add to that. But
Yeah, just a little piece, and I think the bandwidth of the administration, so if we were to incur debt, say today, for all of that money, then it'd be more costly in the long run. Because if you see category C, how the town's offered, and we gladly accept it, because they don't have the bandwidth to do all these projects at once. So by taking the money as we need it and can work on it, it ends up saving in the long run.
Yeah, because you ask for the money at one point doesn't mean you have to borrow the money at the same time. You can go through a series of bands until you're ready to do a bond. So, it's what my issue is that in 19, the school committee was willing to engage with the town governments to decide on a path to follow, and this time around, it's just the school committee saying, we're following this path.
that's good feedback to have.
One of the questions I have in category 1 or category A. So I know you're talking about 20% for design and OPM. And I actually asked the question of our OPM that's managing our $70 million project for our municipal complex. And his comment was pretty clear that 20% is much, much higher than standard. Standard for design and OPM should be between 9 and, did you say 13%?
You said
9 and 11%. So I'm kind of confused at the 20%,
Sure.
where that's coming from.
So that's interesting. Our data shows that it's, Mask has a number of 16%, right? So,
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said.
Mask.
MSBA.
Sorry.
MASC is the Massachusetts Association of School
No,
Committees.
it was the MSBA. had
I'm sorry, it was the MSBA. Thank you, Trevor.
That's where I got confused.
Sorry. Getting my acronyms
Okay,
backwards.
so-
I'm sorry, John.
Spell it out to me, Andy, MSDA?
MSBA. Masco.
Building
Authority.
Thank you.
That makes
That's what I
much
wanted
more
to know.
sense, doesn't
Now
it,
it makes
John?
more sense,
The
yeah.
ones that decide whether or not we're getting money.
Right,
Yeah.
reimbursed.
Yeah, reimbursed. So their average for projects similar to this are 16% for OPM and design. So they got a bunch of data on their website. They summed up at 16%. So could it be 16%? Maybe, right? So I think,
We're running about 10% for design and OPM on a $70 million project.
okay. So, I mean, I think that's one set of data. The other data we have is the MSBA. The other set of data that we have is our assistant superintendent, Jeff, is also gathered data from his projects and has, data of his own that points closer to 20%. So, I don't know how you resolve that.
So we had asked that question in February, and the superintendent said that he'd get us a rationale of why he was carrying 20. He said it was just a number they were carrying, we'd get back. Never heard a word,
Okay.
not even a peep. So that's a big disparity, 10, 11% to 20%. And, I want to be clear here, there's no doubt in my mind the roof needs to be done, there's no doubt in my mind the HVAC needs to be done.
Yep.
Part of what I hope you and your successors in the future will do, and what we're focusing on in our $70 million project is, once we build it, we must maintain it. I think what has happened at Masco, through no fault of your own, this is, I'm gonna point the finger in the Wayback Machine, was years of neglect and zero maintenance was happening. And your superintendent basically called that out, and I will tell you, we probably haven't been so good at maintaining some of our facilities, but we knew we were replacing them. This building is a perfect example of a big investment the town has made, and we've done a very good job of maintaining it. Even to the point of, keeping our architectural significance and bringing in the right vendors to do the work when we could have kind of done it otherwise. But it would be really helpful on the OPM/design piece, and, and I understand that you don't have a full idea of what this whole project would cost. I completely understand that. And we went through this when we started our assessment on our facility. Now, we didn't expect COVID, and we didn't expect, we were in the midst of COVID. We didn't expect the huge amount of inflation that hit us, and so forth. But building costs are not gonna come down, but they're not gonna continue to grow like they have been over the last couple of years. We kind of got caught on the wrong side of that, but what we didn't get caught on was, to Costa's point, when we went forward with a bigger project, rather than piecemealing, originally we were gonna build one building and then come back several years and build a second. We said, what is the cost if we do it now? We fully bonded it. We have saved millions. I would argue 15+ million we've probably saved by bonding this early, and taking the big bite at once. So I kind of want to echo Costa's point, which is, smaller bites at the apple may actually hurt the ultimate outcome of what you're trying to accomplish here. And I will say about Middleton voters, they're very supportive about projects, about bricks and mortar. sometimes a little bit more difficult to sell an override operationally. It's a lot more easier to sell an override structurally, because we've done pretty well. This building, Howe Manning is another perfect example of the town. While they said no the first time, they invested the second time. I think overwhelmingly, they're very happy with both of these buildings. And a perfect example is the 10 million additional we just asked for at town meeting last year, which was not an easy ask. But very overwhelming with just a handful of no votes that happened that day at the town meeting. And a lot of that was because, and I give you credit for being here tonight, a lot of that was because we were very upfront in communicating the process from start to finish, including very difficult decisions. Took me a while to come around for wanting to do it all at once. I've seen the rationale for it today.
Now, with the OPM, right, if this money is approved, we go to our request for proposals to hire an OPM.
Yep.
And you can't tell them much more than, the project is to replace the roof, the HVAC, and the building management system. You don't, because you don't have a design, you don't really have much of anything.
Sure.
So instead of using percentages on estimated construction costs, why didn't you ask OPM firms to give you an estimate, a dollar estimate of what their services would cost?
So the feedback that I got on that is because we didn't think we would get accurate quotes from any organizations that would provide those services. They wouldn't put it down on paper for an unknown sort of project. The OPM funding doesn't go just through the design phase, doesn't go just through the start, it goes through the entire project, right? So they need to know what they're actually going to go and execute later on in order to scope the whole thing.
But when you go out to bid, to hire the OPM,
Yep.
other than what I just said, you won't be able to tell them much more. Because you don't know what the design is, how long it takes, and all of that. It's just like when you build your construction cost, you talk to various construction people, roofers, to get an idea of what you should estimate and, for a roof cost. Why do OPMs, why not do the same thing with OPMs? Because they'll have to give you a number to get the job. They'll have to guess as to what the length of time, how much time they have to spend.
Sure.
Just like a roofer. So you talk to roofers to get that estimate. Why not talk to OPMs to get that estimate? Seems logical to me.
Yeah, I don't know, I mean, my assumption again is that this is what we're doing now, right? I mean, I know it's official that we're going out to do this. Other than to say, the feedback that I've been given since I'm not in that part of the process, right, was they did not believe that they were going to get accurate quotes in order to shape this.
Well, my argument would be it kind of is a check and balance. You're talking to roofers, and if roofer, to build that cost estimate on what the actual cost of the roof, and if it's 5% of the roof cost should be the OPM roof cost, and you do that with the other two, and then you talk to OPMs, and the number they're giving you isn't 5%, it's
Sure.
kind of a check.
Sure.
But as far as I know, that hasn't been done. Talking to OPMs to get a number.
I don't know if Jeff has talked to anybody specific.
At this point, it's kind of too late to do this, right? I mean, even if you went out tonight looking for quotes like this, they're not gonna come in time for town meeting and
And they've already taken their votes at their meeting.
So what happens if,
Making more sense.
So
If you
we,
get a-
we have to go forward with what we're looking at, and the question is, how are we gonna get it through town meeting and get the override voted on? And that, I think we've gotta come up with a way of doing that, because there's little doubt in my mind that the work has to be done. It's kind of unfortunate that we don't have any, I'll say, professional estimates by people in the business behind the whole project. So it's gonna be tougher to sell at that point, and certainly going into town meeting, someone at town meeting is going to want to know, okay, this is $5 million for the design of the OPM. What do you think the scale of the total project's going to be? And remember, the finance committee asked that of you guys, and I mean, you came back with
A little data.
like $30 million.
Yep.
We're gonna have to say that at town meeting.
Yep.
And if no one asked, then it will be me that asks. So,
Yeah.
so the questions come. So we need to prepare, how are we gonna say that? And then, how are you gonna justify it? Says, you don't have hard quotes, but you have to have something standing behind it, some kind of an estimate, and just say, this is what we've got. Maybe it was 25 million, it's a few years old, now we're thinking 30 million, but asking for 20%, maybe that is too much money, but it's not like, if it's not spent on the OPM and the design, that you guys get to spend it somewhere else.
Exactly.
It's got to go towards the project.
Right.
So that would just be additional money for the build. So I think if we can explain it that way and show that, you know, you've done a decent amount of work to come up with those estimates and it seems reasonable, it's got a good chance of going through, I think. 'Cause-
Well, and that brings the other question is, if it's, these three things add up actual construction numbers to around 25, or, you know, whatever it is, what's the breakdown? How much for the roof, how much for the building management, how much for the HVAC system?
Sure. Yeah, so we have, I mean, a breakdown from the Habib report that we could probably, you know, use the same ratios. And John, to go back to your point, right,
Mhm.
about the $30 million, right? We were talking about it a little bit on the DCI, and we look at it as you had the estimates that were gathered back in 2022. Habib report as well as the estimates in 2022 would give us that
What was
level of
that Habib
breakdown.
report again?
That was-
That was 2018.
19?
You know, it was presented in like the fall of 17,
Okay,
Yeah, it's
so that
dated.
all,
so it's pretty dated.
But we do have estimates from 2022, where we could break down
Okay.
the three buckets into some ratios, right? But you take the $30 million and you say, all right, the estimates from 2022 came out to $25 million and inflation, whatever, right? So $30 million, but say $25 million, you know, you could assume on the low end that you're gonna do the like for like that the estimates were based on, and you're gonna get 40% reimbursement from the MSBA. That brings you down to $15 million. Maybe that's the low end, or maybe you don't get any support, and we go and do all the electrification and green services, and it's a $45 million project, right? So that's maybe the high end, and you know, you're somewhere in the midpoint there, right? It's albeit reasonable.
Yeah, and certainly when you do the design, there's gonna be trade-offs between capital cost and operating cost.
100%.
And that's gonna happen during the initial phase, and someone's gonna have to decide, we're gonna go for more capital cost to defray operating costs,
Right.
or the other way around.
Right.
So I presume the school committee and DCI are gonna make those decisions with the OPM and.
So the DCI can't decide anything on their own.
Mhm.
But the building committee will be established, that will include the DCI, to deliberate on these types of subjects and make a recommendation back to the school committee, who will make a decision. So yes, right, I mean, I think the expectation is that the building committee is going to be established to have these technical, financial, planning discussions,
Okay.
and then provide recommendations back to the school committee.
So, and one of the things that I've seen, to get back to Brian's comment about maintenance, certainly when you've got a new facility, it doesn't need a lot of maintenance. So the superintendents who were in charge at the time in the first few years, actually the first couple of superintendents, since they tend to
Right.
keep coming and going every 4 years or so, they don't have to spend a lot of money on maintenance. And then they're gone, and there's a new team, and they might spend a little money on maintenance or not, but typically with the challenges in school funding, the maintenance is good enough, and it keeps getting kicked down the road, and here we are now 20 years later. There are serious deficiencies because those previous administrations dropped the ball, right? There's no accountability because of the way the governance works. With the school committee turning over, with the superintendencies turning over, there's no continuity, there's no one you can look at and say, why didn't you do that? Well, they're all saying now, I wasn't here, right? And back then, it was, what's the problem? There isn't a problem. So there needs to be some mechanism put in place at this construction, so some kind of a plan of preventive maintenance is put in place so that the current school committee and administration can make sure on an annual basis, have you kept up with the preventive maintenance plan?
And so to speak to that, I know I've personally asked the administration to come up with a preventative maintenance plan because the district has never had one. And if that's something that isn't done by the time next year rolls around, or this summer we make his goals, I'll commit to bring that up. I can't commit to that being one of his goals because I'm just one member. But I definitely see the need in that. And our operating budget, we made sure supported that. We included one position who was previously ESSER funded, a maintenance plant facilities technician, to add them back to our team because we have our own maintenance team. None of the towns service us, so that department I think now has 4. That this solidifies it at 4 instead of 3, losing that position. And part of their job description is to help in making that preventative maintenance plan.
Right, so, Middleton's kind of going through a similar kind of change in that we're looking to hire someone because we're launching a new building, but we need to bring someone in who is gonna be responsible for maintenance of all the town buildings. And I would presume that person is going to be an expert on, I don't know, building maintenance and systems. They would be competent to design a decent preventative maintenance plan and also handling problems as they come up. And the engineering group and the OPM that's putting this project together might be the perfect group to come up with that plan based upon the work that they did, so that going forward, you've got all of the, never mind, changing the air filters, that's the trivial part of it, but when do you have to rebuild, it depends upon the equipment that's installed, what's the care and feeding of the
I would
boiler.
expect on this HVAC and building,
Management system.
thank you, BMS system, that as part of the OPM and design and build of this, you will have some type of commissioning service that will be provided as part of your contract. If not, you should be really looking at that. And we're gonna have a commissioning service with our facilities that will start before the buildings are completed and will run for a period of time after they're turned over to us and we move in. And that will be everything from, punch list items, as well as training what will eventually be our facilities director, our assistant superintendent for facilities, DPW superintendent for facilities, that will ensure that we understand how to maintain, how to operate, but develop a maintenance plan. I'm surely gonna wanna see that happen, so
Right.
you should ensure that some type of commissioning plan happens. Now, it's probably not gonna be as big as for a 70 million two-building project, but there should be some type of plan for the building management systems and the HVAC.
For sure.
Because we learned with this building, just the systems in here, which are now,
20.
I was gonna say 16 years old, 20 years old, they're not outdated, but when we started with this building, it was like nothing that our facilities had ever dealt with before. Town hall, we had all the coal furnace with somebody shoveling coal in it, so.
Yeah, I'm not sure that having a preventative maintenance plan is enough.
Yep.
That will take care of things that can be done within, you know, the confines of the operating and capital budgets.
Mm-hmm.
But periodically, there will be larger capital needs. And, you know, in the town, do it as part of our capital budget, and it's a separate thing. There is no mechanism to get those larger projects approved. So I think there needs to be a discussion between the district and the 3 towns of how that can come to pass. So that if 7 years down, the road, you need to spend $400,000 to do a major maintenance on the roof that will extend its, life. How do you get that money? What's the, if you, rely on the flow of money at any town meeting, you may not get it. So is there a mechanism that can be agreed to that will enhance the chances of the money being there to maintain the facility? And, those 4 parties may not agree to anything, and that's fine, but not having the discussion is not fine as far as I'm concerned.
Right, and Costa makes a good point. On the last couple of years, there's been a couple of asks for warrant articles, which we can fund out of free cash, which is a decent way to do it. But we need a heads up. We need to know what's going to happen 5 years down the road, because we're doing our capital budget out of free cash and stabilization and a few other things. If you guys have plans to be asking Middleton for $150,000 to $200,000 in warrant articles every year for the next 10 years, we need to know about it so that we can plan for that kind of expense.
We need to build it in our own capital.
Right, we're gonna build it into our own capital plan. Because if we're surprised, we may have to fund your project and delay something that we've got going. So, because we have limits on how low we can go with free cash. So just because free cash was certified at, $2 million, doesn't mean that you can spend 400,000 of it. There are a lot of plans on how to deal with that.
Plus our fiscal policies that don't allow us to spend
Right.
To a certain extent. And I'd also say in free cash, and this is really to the category 3 or the category C
Right.
items. On those items, and I know you have some for 25, 26, and then some that are like a lower requirement. I will say the free cash that we had this year was a wee bit of an anomaly. Some of that is because our investment income has been extremely strong for a whole slew of reasons. We bonded our project. The investment we're getting off some of that cash that's been sitting that we are now spending has been pretty high. Think about what we're all getting on a regular savings account now compared to what we were getting 2 years ago. Same thing with regular investments. That's absolutely not going to continue. Secondly, those dollars are gone for us to invest, or they're going pretty quickly. Every 2 weeks, we sign big checks to our OPM and our design firm, and in a couple of weeks to the subcontractors that'll be sticking shovels in the ground.
Thank you for bringing that up.
I had to get that plugged in. But the other point is, we're writing really big checks with a very large override we've already done, and we're trying to keep up with our own capital needs, but we're not gonna be able to invest probably to as big of an extent we were doing 2 years ago. So that plus a free cash crunch that we're gonna be dealing with, that I think our other 2 towns are already dealing with, or they will be. We really need a good long runway. And I think that goes back to Costa's point of sometimes laying it all out, like back in 17 when your predecessors came in and talked about the Habib report. It was very eye-opening. Now, some of it we were wondering, like, what is a want, what is a wish, and what is a need? But I think it was a good starting point. But I really think that you would do a lot of justice to the ability to get what needs to be done by really kind of opening the kimono and looking at the entire spectrum of this. That doesn't mean it may be approved, it doesn't mean it's all gonna be extended. But taking this in piecemeal may be doing a detriment, because I can't guarantee that every year we're gonna be able to do 200,000, 300,000, 150,000, 200,000 in free cash. Eventually, some of these items, we may actually have to override. And I think after last year, this year, there's gonna be some override fatigue in Middleton.
Sure. So let me ask, so that's great feedback, thank you. So what's the right cadence? What's the right, so I hear the point about, bucketing it into one and going for it once instead of year to year to year to year. But in terms of the dialogue that we have to have going forward, what's the right cadence? What's the right mechanism for doing that?
So as far as use of free cash, I mean, we maintain a 5-year capital budget so we can see expenses coming down the road for 5 years. Put together a 5-year plan for the kind of expenses that you want to come for a warrant article. And update it every year and give it to Jackie so that we can feed it into the capital plan.
Can I make one small correction?
Mm-hmm.
Give that, so anyone from the administration, so myself, the town administrator, and the finance director would be happy to grab that from you. But we'd be happy to include you in our 5-year capital planning. So we get going on that in the fall in-house, just internally with staff, and then with the department heads in the new year every year. So anything you can give us in January each year for the outlying 5 years. So for example, this year was January 24, so we were looking for fiscal 25 through fiscal 29 from all of our departments, as well as the Tri-Town elementary schools. So anything you can give us in January, February for the following 5 fiscal years is gonna help us work more collaboratively to understand what's coming down the pipeline. And I will say that there was a slide a minute ago, Trevor, can you go back, I'm sorry. I will say this too, we try to watch a lot of your meetings, we try to consume a lot of what you're putting out there, but having that conversation of like, hey, here's what we're doing is really valuable to us, because we try to go to your meetings, we try to go to the Tri-Town meetings, we try to consume from a lot of departments, a lot of school departments, and then we're also consuming 10 to 12 municipal budgets. So anything you can do to just be like, hey, this is the night we're gonna do this. Even a spreadsheet is super helpful. I think this is the first time I've seen this particular version of this slide. I don't know how new or old it is, but the more we're here all the time. Anything you can give us, but January especially is incredibly helpful.
Okay, so January is kind of the
Cutoff.
the cutoff, and then leading up to January is the times where we need to be having a dialogue around what's in it, right?
Yeah, 'cause we're
Even
discussing.
prior,
Yeah, we're discussing.
dialogue prior, and then
Yeah, when do we do
submitting.
the operational meeting in Saturday meeting, and then February, and then March for the?
First
March is
Saturday in February, and
Yeah.
then capital is the second week in
March.
March.
So it's always the first Saturday of February and the first Saturday of March.
Yeah.
But I'm saying January only because you guys don't deal with capital till March, the elected and appointed officials. But we're already knocking away at capital in January
Yeah.
with the numbers. So I think January is helpful because we gotta be ready for you to review a nice document.
Right. So the plan's gonna be solidified like a month before we're meeting. So that's why you're having it to the administration in January. is
Yeah.
the- is the-
Right after
So
Martin
fall
Luther King Day.
previews,
Yeah.
fall previews, and then January
Right.
handoff.
And we understand, even with our own capital plan, things will exit a plan that we thought were a priority that
Sure.
a lot of our fire capital, we've been successful through grants. to take it off the plan. Others we've added because they weren't successful. And I get that things, you may have a 5-year plan and then come in year 2 and say, this wasn't on the plan, but we've got to do this. Security, safety, whatever the case is. Secondly, in the past, we had, I thought, a really good ladies and gentlemen relationship or handshake with Masco around warrant articles. That warrant articles would be a unanimous effort. If Boxford, Topsfield, and Middleton had a warrant article, something that we were willing to fund for you outside of your normal operating budget, i.e. bigger capital items, curriculum refresh, whatever the case was, we took the approach of, and the agreement was with Masco that we would do this on a unanimous basis. It's now a 2 of 3 community vote, as we're being told, and that could really hamstring us if we've made a decision on our capital needs and then get something late in the process from you. And we've always been good about putting articles on the warrant article that has been asked of us. However, if this comes in too late, we may either be in a position of having to drop something from our list that we've already agreed to, or if, say our town meeting said no and the other 2 said yes, we own it, kind of like the operating budget. And then where does that money come from? And so that's why the earlier conversation will make for a much smoother process.
It's good to understand this cadence. Thanks.
To illustrate my point about some structural change, if, that $1,054,000 that you had started with was really what you needed to have in that 1 year, it would have been, another override.
Right.
Right? So taking 3 2/3 votes at town meeting and 3 positive votes at the elections. I'm saying that we should be a discussion between the district and the 3 towns of how you can get at that need without as many hurdles. Because that will ensure that the facility is maintained to its highest and best degree. There may not be a mechanism that's agreeable to everybody, but the discussion, that conversation should happen, I believe.
Because that's what happened last year. Last year we had our February budget meeting, and the discussion was mostly around, at the February meeting with your superintendent, was mostly around capital at the time, because you all hadn't really gotten to your budget negotiations yet. And that's what usually happens. We have our first budget hearing in February, then our capital meeting in March. And usually, we're further along in the budget process than your committee is, not your administration, but your committee is. And I remember he told us, we don't have any big capital needs. And then March came in and it was like, we need an override for capital needs. And we were like, whoa, what? Like,
We just saw him 4 weeks
yeah,
prior.
but what happened in 4 weeks? Now, he said, well, we weren't really sure if we were gonna do this, or we were, or we weren't, and it really caught us flat-footed. That was pulled back. And then this year, in February, when it was, we may be looking at 5 years of annual big capital investments that may or may not require overrides each of the 5 years. So, I can't sit at town meeting and honestly say, if we override for this OPM and design, then we're gonna be coming back probably next year for a much bigger override for the HVAC, the roof, and the building management systems, and then possibly 3 more years of capital needs that, if that first priority and second priority end up becoming the multiple year priorities, we're probably talking about additional overrides, at least in the Middleton case. And if at some point the voters and taxpayers are gonna be like, whoa, wait a minute. And I think they're getting close. We've done 2 years in a row of an override or cost related to an override for the facility. This year the OPM in this piece, our operational override, which we've been very open about for 2 years that this is coming. And then we're gonna do a roof repair on Fuller Meadow. So much smaller than your roof, but a roof replacement of the old part of Fuller Meadow. So my fear is that we are reaching, well, not just breaking point, it's like, people are gonna say enough. And last year was hard because reval happened simultaneously, and, I mean, I just did my taxes the other day, and I looked at what I paid in property taxes, and I still feel like I'm getting a bang for my buck in this town, but I know what it was 3 years ago, I know what it is today.
So, speaking of the roof, at the Capitol Saturday meeting, I had asked, how much of, is the roof, construction estimate, and how big is the roof? Still waiting for that information. I wanted to,
How much is the construction estimate, and how much is the roof?
the size of the roof. How many square
Square
feet?
foot.
Yeah,
Got it.
square foot of the roof.
So, because I wanted to compare that square foot per square foot cost to what the elementary
Yeah.
was estimating for the Fuller Meadow roof. Two should have been easy numbers, Mike didn't have them at the tip of his tongue, but it's several weeks later, why hasn't it been provided?
I think I've read that today, actually, in the Habib report. Like, if you're looking for square footage wise, I can go back and look later, but I think I did see that.
What we
in the
really
Habib report.
want is the superintendent to respond to us and to come to a meeting like this and sit right there and answer these questions. That's what we want,
This
I
is the
disagree.
problem.
and it's a
Well, I
problem.
would say the
We don't
superintendent.
feel that we're getting really treated respectfully by the administration of Masconomet.
I would say the superintendent and the assistant superintendent that manages facilities and operations. That would be,
Right, you want Jeff here.
yeah,
So,
Well, those
I
are
wouldn't know
number-
if I fell over.
but so, I mean, Jeff has met with town officials. I know he met with Justin. I don't know if other folks were invited or not invited, or Trust is saying no.
You guys, they met with the town administrators, period,
Okay.
Yeah.
during the day. What you're being told here is they need to meet with town officials, not staff. And since most of us have, jobs, it has to be kind of in the evening.
If I may, Costa, I will say, just for the benefit of our Masconomet representatives, we value those staff conversations during the day. That's part of how we get business done. But at the same time, from my understanding, I did not attend the most recent meeting as the assistant town administrator. I attended some of these. I don't go to all of them because there's two of us for a reason, and we have other responsibilities. But I can tell you from what I understand, the same questions that our select board members, our finance committee members have been asking in our budget Saturday meetings, in other budget meetings, are the same types of questions that are being brought by the town administrators. And I can't speak on behalf of my colleagues in Topsfield and Boxford, or on behalf of town administrator Saltzback, but I know these types of questions are being brought forward after we've had the public meetings as well. So I think, kind of in summation, when we go to budget Saturday as municipal staff, I walk out of that meeting with probably 3 or 4 pages of notes of things, questions, even if it's something that's a one-off question that a member of FinCom or a member of the select board have, we go back and that Monday, we're doing homework, if that's not a number that we have at handy, we're grabbing it from our notes, we're grabbing it from resources, or we're figuring that number out. We're going back to the folks that we got a cost estimate from to ask a question. We're following up, and the next time we see the select board and finance committee, either jointly or separately, we're following up on those questions, because that's the information they need to make an informed decision. So we're just asking for that part of our process to be kind of full circle with the Masconomet process, as well as that when those questions are getting asked, we're just respectfully asking that they're coming back to us before the deadline for a vote for putting something for you folks to authorize debt so that it can get to the select board to go on the warrant. We want to try to solve those things, not now when the warrant's closed and we're trying to understand but earlier in the process, before you folks take your authorization vote, before the warrants close, so that everyone at the table is making as informed a decision as possible in a given budget cycle.
And so I don't disagree with anything that's been said, but would be helpful for at least me, and I could probably say for us, is if select board members or finance committee people are reaching out to the administration to copy us on your
Mhm.
correspondence, because this is
Good, yeah.
news.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Trevor.
no,
I was gonna say, I mean, I haven't had a lot of exchanges with you, John. I know that I met with the FinCom a couple weeks ago, and you guys had some requests, and I hope that, you know, we were responsive to those requests quickly, and, you know, if there's ever a time, I mean, I hope, and I'd love your feedback on this, I mean, are there times where you're engaging with the Middleton representatives and not getting information that you need, or is it just a lack of engagement in general?
This is kind of a shift for, prior to this year, for a decade and a little bit, I was on the Masco School Committee. I attended all of the select board meetings and most of the FinCom meetings. So anything that happened at the school committee or on its subcommittees that I thought would be of interest, it got relayed. Anything that happened at those meetings that I thought would be, of interest to the Masco School Committee, I relayed that. So I think everybody felt sort of informed.
Connected.
And that was a unique, situation,
Some people didn't like being informed.
You're not wrong.
Well, there was an effort at the time by former board members to actually bar elected select board members from being on the Masco School Committee, that they would not be seated if elected. That obviously went over like you know what in church, but some of that was, I viewed this as one side of the equation. I viewed that as somebody doesn't want information shared. Again, I'm not pointing to you three or
No,
our
I
four
get it, no.
representatives.
I get it.
You
And
get what I'm-
I do, and I think for me, I mean, at least in my daily line of work, it's, sometimes if there's, too many, for me at least, knowing all of this, and I said to Justin too, I mean, I'm absolutely happy to be able to be the direct contact for you at your meetings quarterly, moving forward instantly, solution, problem solved. I'm home by 11:30 in the morning from my job, so I'm available during the day, but to at least talk with whatever you need for information, whether it's, DCI or capital operating budget, whatever it is, I'm happy to, if I'm not on that subcommittee, to get that information and be the direct line of contact, because it just, again, we're trying to solve the problem here. We're trying to make it all work. It shouldn't be about, somebody not providing information. I mean, those are easy requests and easy numbers that should be given. So for me, we all do. I want to get you those numbers. You shouldn't have no response. That's not okay, because all three towns, it's a team effort here. So that's not gonna solve anything. And so if, for my part at least, I'm happy to be that person, because it does help to have the connection constantly. It makes everything flow nice and easily, even if you don't have all the answers and you can't flow from one place to the next smoothly, and there's not always an agreement, at least the information is passing from one place to the next.
And this year,
without question.
everybody had to sort of get used to a different
Yeah.
sort of communication, system,
Sure.
because that built-in system,
Yeah,
didn't, exist anymore, and I don't think, on everybody's part could have done more. Select board members could have reached out more, the delegate, our reps could have reached out more, and FinCom, et cetera. But once you get to a new rhythm, it'll be better.
Yeah. So Matt,
I appreciate that.
when you and Trevor came to the finance committee meeting, I mean, you heard what we were talking about, and you went away with some questions that we had, and you got back to us, really a few days later with what I thought was some, pretty good information. And about the only thing that is kind of in the back of my mind is, I wonder if the administration is standing behind the document that you gave me. And I just get the impression that if push comes to shove, they would say, well, you know, Matt did his best to give you the right number, but we're not gonna stand behind it. Because I didn't see really anything official from the administration coming in. So I appreciate you doing it, and I believe the data that you gave me is the data, because I've seen numbers similar to that before, so it kind of all fits together.
Yep.
It's just a little concerning. I'm wondering where the administration is on this, and why they aren't out in front saying, this is how it's laid out. This is
Yeah.
how we did it, for right or for wrong. Even if they're wrong, they can say, yeah, maybe we are wrong about this, but it's at least close. And that might be enough to get the job done.
So, yeah, I won't speak for the administration, but I can just tell you the process I followed when I was gathering that data.
That's okay, you don't really have to go through that.
Well, I just want to let you know that
Okay.
as I did that, I shared the data with the administration, gave them an opportunity to provide feedback. I shared the data with the chair of DCI, and I shared the data with Melissa,
Mhm.
and we were able to get concurrence on the data, right? So whether or not the administration really stands behind what I wrote, I'll let them answer that.
Did they,
But-
yeah, and not to interrupt, right to the point, did they correspond with you after you sent it?
Yeah.
So they did acknowledge,
Yes, they did.
just not any feedback to go along with it? Or yes, thank you, I received it,
Looks good, Matt. That's like
Okay.
the message, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, it was nothing that we hadn't been talking about in our DCI meetings, right? It wasn't data that I created or anything like that. I had pulled it from charts that we had created in the DCI and discussions we had and meeting notes, and I just kind of pulled in all these data sources of things that were out there anyway, so I wasn't creating anything new. So when I just put it all together into what I hoped was a coherent summary, I shared it with them, and they said, yeah, it looks good.
Okay, good.
But I hear what you're saying, though there are some things that have to come from administration. I mean, we as representatives can only, we do what we can, especially through the subcommittee and getting our information. So, you know, at least we hear your message that you're gonna have to hear from them at some point. There will be the voice, the authority to give you the information and the data and the reports that you're asking for. I mean, we will do our best to be able to connect this message to them and make it loud and clear that there needs to be a better flow of communication with
So-
specifics, especially, I mean, it's money, I mean, it's a lot of money.
They just
It's-
can't be the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain.
A
That's
perfect
all.
example is, so in the next several weeks, there are going to be several individuals from the administration that are going to be holding, from the town and schools administration here on the municipal side, that are gonna be very active in meeting with community groups, neighborhood groups, forums such as this. That'll include our town administrator, that'll include our assistant town administrator, our finance director, our police chief, our fire chief,
Representatives from the Tri-Town Elementary School.
Tri-Town Elementary School will be there, where we, you know, Chief LaCoste is gonna be very clear in why he's asking for an override for 3 additional firefighter paramedics. It's not just the select board, as, you know, we've put a budget together that includes an override for those 3 positions. But quite honestly, I can speak very well to it, well, I think I can speak fairly well to it. Dougie can speak much better than anybody, he's the one leading the department, and he can talk intimately about that. I don't expect you all to be speaking intimately about this whole project, you guys are the board of directors, so to speak. If your CEO was pitching something to Wall Street, it would be the CEO and the CFO that would be pitching it to Wall Street, not a member of the board of directors. I highly recommend he come out to the community along with the assistant superintendent and have these discussions, because in the end, select board members come and go, school committee members will come and go. People 5 years from now will say, I did a great job or a terrible job, but they're gonna remember the town administrator, the police chief, and the fire chief, because they ran the organization. And quite honestly, when the chief says, this is why I asked for this, he says it with authority, when the superintendent says, this is what I've asked for and why, he or she says it with authority. Not that you don't have authority, but I will tell you,
No, it's understood.
this will
of
go a
course.
long way towards, and I don't expect Justin and Sarah and Jackie and our chiefs to, in these sessions, to be also talking about, well, we also have an override here for Masco, and this is what is the rationale for it. Oh, and we have a school committee member here that can speak to it. It's kind of like the empty chair in the room.
Yes.
And we wanna have an honest dialogue with the voters about all of the needs. There's multiple votes that have to happen here, both at town meeting and then on the ballot. And if we can do this collectively, so it doesn't become a menu of, well, this got support because people spoke to it, but this doesn't, but we think the school roof needs to be done. Something's gonna get missed.
No.
Do you have a date for that?
There's several dates that are happening, that these are happening.
So-
And quite honestly, there's a reason why some of these discussions are happening at the department head level, rather than this board or the finance committee actually having the discussion. Now, we'll be doing our own activities similar to what you guys are gonna be doing to gather support for this, or to answer questions, or not engaging in social media questions, but all the rest of it of, you know, when people ask me, what does this mean and why, I can clearly explain why, but
Right.
if they're really asking questions about the 3 firefighters, I'm gonna send them to Doug.
Sure.
Why? Cause he's gonna
That's the
tell a
source.
story much better than I'm ever gonna be able to tell.
You know, on any override, the default choice is no. It's only when people know and understand the reasoning for it that they get, you know, they can be convinced to vote yes. So if you haven't gotten before enough voters to explain the reasons why you need that $5 million, it won't pass. Because who will vote to raise their taxes when they don't know
Why?
and are convinced for the reason to do it?
No, I agree, and I think, I mean, Matt did a great job, like, he can do a great job explaining it, but there is nothing like hearing it from the source, and I think it's a point well taken. I mean, it makes sense to all of us, and at some point, we can only do and explain so much. It makes much more of an impact, I think, hearing it from,
If it's not important enough for the
Sure.
superintendent to come here, then why should it be important enough for us to go for it?
And then don't wanna make promises on behalf of the administration or the committee, but us 3 members, I know. I mean, if you watched the last meeting, I think I expressed myself pretty clearly
Yes,
in
you
all of
did.
your comments. But I think we can all bring that message back and try to say it as loud and clearly
Yes.
as we can. But again, we're
Uh,
3 members on an 11-member board.
Earlier you had mentioned, you know, the building committee, and, you know, having, you know, people, you know, with, you know, expertise in various, you know, constructions and projects, you know, is great. What I think you're missing is, you know, people that can, you know, give you good advice on the state of each community, you know. How receptive would there be to an ask of this much at this time? That, you know, that's why that, you know, district capital planning task force was put together back in 18 and 19 to provide that kind of, you know, feedback. So, you know, at some point, I think, you know, the school committee needs to have that point of view from each community expressed beyond, you know, the school committee reps. From
That's-
each of that, you guys all have your own points of view, but, you know, getting a point of view from a select board member or a FinCom, you know, member about the state of the finances and, you know, other things in the community, I think, is also valuable.
That's why our building committee for the municipal project, there's not a single member of the select board that sits on that. and that was purposeful. And the reason for that is, I mean, we've been intimately involved since we started, and we actually created a separate committee to study what needed to happen that we didn't sit as members of. You know, how best to figure out what was needed for police and fire than having current and former fire officials serve in that committee? What was best for a senior community center than having current and former senior center directors, council on aging members that are actually doing the work every day? We made a decision of not having a building committee that was made up of 2 or 3 of us, for a reason. It was a little bit of a, quite honestly, a check and balance, but it was also ensuring that there was a completely different mindset at the table. And I will tell you, I mean, Jackie will tell you, I'll ask questions like, what, like, why is this? And, well, this is what the building committee's done. And the building committee chairperson, who, by the way, is freaking fabulous on this project, will come in and regularly update us. And it's very refreshing to see the way that they're looking at things that, quite honestly, would be different than I would have looked at it with my 5 years of thinking about this. It's a whole fresh set of eyes, and that's really why we're a little concerned in the beginning on the original makeup of the building committee. I thought it, again, no disrespect to the school committee, but it was becoming an echo chamber of, well, we're doing exactly what we thought, and sometimes the unknown unknowns are what trip you up.
Yeah, and I think Trevor brought up, you brought that up a lot.
Yeah,
We were kind of
absolutely.
going through all of the editing of that to make it so that it's not just this inside the bubble that we, you know, the point is to get advice, and I think Matt brought it up many times, that we need outside viewpoints. We need people that know what they're doing and not just us, and not have it just be us. And I think we also, I don't know who brought it up, the issue of the chair not having a vote or not being, what was?
That
what
was
the
if we
other-
needed a tiebreaker.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, we have ex officios that don't have a vote either,
yeah,
like Jackie and Justin sit on the
Just go.
committee.
Yeah.
They don't
For the
have a vote.
entertainment.
So no one in the administration has a
Yeah.
vote?
Correct.
Not just the administration, the chief, both chiefs, the COA director as well.
Or at this, you know, building committee, the superintendent and assistant superintendent have votes.
That's not right.
I did raise that point at the meeting.
So, let me
So
ask
now you understand why we issued the letter we issued?
yes,
Yeah,
no,
okay.
I mean, absolutely, I mean, and I think
That was a little bit of I know it was a little bit of an MX missile, but time was ticking, there was a reason why we did that.
The
So-
message was loud and clear.
I'm curious, right, because if you guys heard my perspective on this at the last school committee, it was, we should just get rid of the votes. What are we voting on? It's not a decision-making board, it's an advisory board. And we're getting hung up on voting powers in an organization with a vote. You can go provide advice to a school committee from a board without having to vote on something. It doesn't have to be binary this way. We could say it can be, here's the perspective of the building committee.
But your building committee is gonna make decisions that are clear decisions that your
No,
school
no.
committee would not make.
No, it's only make recommendations to the school. The school committee is
Is the building
It's
committee.
the only, it's
But-
the
But
body
if you
that-
vote-
But I wanna be clear, that's legally how the select board is as well. The building committee made significant amount of decisions last night, for example, on
That we will
sub-trades.
affirm.
And the thing is, to your point, Matt, I know what you're saying, that the legal authority rests with the school committee, as it does with us with the select board. The select board are the contracting authority for the OPM, for the designer, architect, for the construction manager, and to allow, this coming Tuesday, they're going to allow the construction manager to go and be making contract with all of the filed sub-trade bidders. But all of those decisions were made in that building committee meeting, so I hear what your point is. I will say there are more split votes, especially in the early days on a building committee, than people realize. We're at a point where that committee's working really well together. They've been together for 2.5 years, so we have a lot of unanimous votes now. But there are critical decisions where they don't want to make a unanimous recommendation, and sometimes they don't. So I know what you're saying, that it's not legal, but I think it's showing where the sway of the committee's going. And the select board will vote on everything the building committee voted on last night in their session on Tuesday. Significant things, but the committee's job was to spend the time in the weeds, doing the vetting, doing the staff work and the homework, and voting so that the select board knew with confidence that they could take that recommendation as a strong recommendation from the building committee. So I think when Brian says checks and balances, that's what we're talking about, is that, again, no legal authority, but they've been charged with an important task. So it's a little, I think it's a funny misnomer, but I think it works.
And I think that that's the intent of the building committee as well, that we're establishing, right? I guess my point is, if I'm on the school, since I'm on the school committee, if I'm only viewing this from my school committee seat, if somebody comes to me and says, the building committee voted this way, right, and that's binary, and it doesn't necessarily provide a lot of data behind why, or what the other perspectives were, or how the vote was, versus, man, there was a lot of deliberation, it ended up being, a 7-6 vote, so it just barely passed, and here, that's different data for the school committee to consider, right? And so my position was, just advise, right?
Yeah.
You can vote, right, if you want, but like, the vote doesn't decide anything. The school committee has to make the final decision on things, so.
I think it's true, and I think I appreciate that the ownership that you take of it, and I think the select board has done a really good job of that as well. That everything that's come from the building committee, all those final decisions, what is eventually went to the special town meeting in the fall, all went through the select board. But I can tell you, you also get to a certain point in a construction project where the select board are also still the chief executive officials of the town. The way the school committee is the chief executive officials of the regional school district as its own special government. And you've got other governing to do. You've got other weeds to get into that are your authority, that don't have a clean, like, let's pick this project up and put it with this other group. So that's the other thing to consider, that, the select board, unless they wanted to meet weekly, would not have the bandwidth to do what the building committee does on their review. There was a period in time, leading up to the fall special town meeting, that the building committee met 52 times in 2 years. So they were meeting every other week if they were evenly spread. And so that's the other thing that I would just put, is that you're the chief executive officials of that regional school district. You have a lot of governing to do. And you guys might actually meet more than the select board does. I think there might be a record there between your subcommittees.
We're meeting tonight, and I'm gonna see you again on Monday and Tuesday.
That's not enough, Debbie.
To be conscious of the time, I don't wanna make the library staff stay here too late. We were supposed to.
With the 400,000, what is gonna be done? Which items on that long list are gonna be taken care of by the 400,000?
This is what we had asked at the capital. that
Which
we
one are you
Never
asking?
got an answer to.
So the 400,000 for FY '25, that's coming from free cash of the three, well, I can't tell the other two are funding, but we're funding from free cash. How much of the 1,054,100 is being funded by that?
Which,
We split it into two.
yeah, but which
Wonder which
specific
tasks.
item or items is gonna be taken care of by the 400,000?
And I don't think, I don't think that was discussed at the capital meeting, just because we didn't decide to split yet. Just,
That
But-
decision happened later.
I know so if we go forward with the full, say, $30 million, part of it is if you get to 30% of the building's cost, the state automatically triggers that you have to bring your building up to code. And so that elevator modernization is something we anticipate coming, so we're kind of planning for that, as one of the pieces. Otherwise, our building is pretty much in code. Sorry to sidetrack a little bit.
No, good to know.
I thought I put it in your cost,
Now
I'll
we
take
know
the
the
action.
elevators.
We will
coming
get
too.
that to you.
Because, I was looking at, the audio system is about 400,000, but, if you do other things, what are the things that add up to about 400,000?
Yeah, I know the kitchen equipment's.
Yeah, I think the kitchen equipment's probably coming first. That was something that I heard clearly. It wasn't a wish, it was a must. And I appreciate that's no longer part of something that was gonna be bonded.
Yeah, I remember you bringing that up, so I brought that up a few times.
I got that action.
And I know this is 26, 27, 28, 29 is 40 years out, but if you take the remaining 600 and some odd thousand from 25, 26, and then the 3.5 million that's on that, would be helpful to see like where you think that would be over a 5-year period, to John's point earlier. And I know there's a couple of those like the, well, there's actually more of them. There's the second priorities of another 2.9 million.
So we have that,
Yeah, what will be the,
so you're looking for 5 columns instead of 2 columns,
yeah, I guess so, yeah.
right, so, yeah, we have that. Okay.
Because we just really wanna start planning for that as well.
That might take me a couple more days to get my hands on, but 400K, we have at our fingertips, I just work right in there, so that I can get comfortable with.
All right, any more questions?
I'm glad we made all these chuckles. I
Well,
almost got there the first
it would have been useful if you had audience that wasn't FinCom and select board.
But we did record it for the viewing public at home.
Well, again, we appreciate all of you coming out. I hope this is
Thank you.
the first of
Thank
many
you.
throughout
Yeah.
the next probably year stretch.
We are gonna, it's going to be at least I guess I could speak for the 3 of us and Dominic, but the communication, at least, you know, from our perspective, is going to be much tighter, and we will do our best to get everything that you need as quickly as we can. If we don't have the answer, we'll get you the person that has the answer, because it's, you know, again, we're trying to make it work. What's the point in not providing you with what you need? This isn't.
Because we want to work with
Right.
you. We want to help and assist in getting if the override, these are a must. This isn't a wish list. None of us have ever said it's a wish list.
No, but it's a reasonable
We knew it was
ask.
a must,
Yeah.
but we need to help you sell it to the taxpayers so they understand where their taxes are going.
No, of course.
And if we're not confident in why we're helping and what we're saying, then we're not doing anybody any justice, not the taxpayer and not the school committee.
Well,
We
it's hard
need
to sell
work
anything if you
together.
don't know what you're selling, and if you
Yeah,
don't
you're
have
right.
confidence in what you're saying. It's,
Right.
I don't ever like speaking to a group of people to pitch something that I don't feel, you know, comfortable or
Confident.
confident in, so,
Yes.
it's not an unreasonable ask, so we will get you, to the best that we can, all of the information that you need, and moving forward, you know, I'll send you everything that I can, recapping from all of the subcommittees, any documents or links or info, charts, any kind of reports that we can get to you, we'll get to you, so, and we'll get you all of those answers.
Do you guys have plans on, what you're gonna do to kind of sell the override direct to the voters?
As an at-town meeting.
Well, at town meeting, that's a good
Right.
opportunity, but it's gotta go beyond that, like
So the
the administration's going around at different.
People are gonna be
communities.
voting in the ballot before town meeting.
Yeah.
Right,
So the administration I know is going to, the Council on Aging, I believe I saw that, he mentioned that. That's the only like solid group that I know of. A lot of it is expected on the members to go and sell, because between the leadership on the school committee and the administration, they see this as our project, and so it is on us to go and sell it. So that is something that we're doing. We just met last week and solidified all our mail outs. We're doing a mail out, that'll be
Be
up
very
soon.
careful on mailings, because OCPF clearly looks at, in terms of using district money or community money, town money for mailings that are either supporting or opposing an override.
It's a ballot question, that's the issue. We can support town meeting, I believe, but we can't support a ballot question. So we can't reference the polls,
There's-
we can't.
But there's just a very fine line.
Yeah, there is.
That's what I'm telling you, just be very careful on that, because I've seen post overrides where those items have kind of blew up.
Gotcha.
Somebody always complains, it always happens.
What's awesome to see is a united and cohesive, at least Middleton Masco school committee members. That's not always been the case, and it's refreshing to see how obviously united and cohesive you are.
No, and I think we're all pretty, you know, it's a big, communication is key for all of us. I think it's why all of us wanted to even be on the school committee. I think that we felt like for years there was, you know, nobody knew what was going on, or there was maybe a lack of communication between school and, you know, and families and what was happening. So I think that, you know, it's a big deal for all of us sitting at this table to at least get the communication right. And I know that Matt and I are new, and Trevor, I feel like has been, even though he's, how long, 2 years?
Trevor's
Feels like it's like 20 years that Trevor's been doing this, but I know that even Matt and I are, you know, I know it's our
You never
first
knew
year,
it was
but
gonna be this much work, did you?
that, you know what though, I like it, I don't mind it, I like it, my husband thinks I'm crazy, he's like, where are you going tonight? So, but I think this is a big thing for all of us, we don't want anybody, especially in our own town, because I know I love how things are run here in this town. I think that you guys do an amazing job, and it's not like that everywhere in other places. So we want to make sure that you feel like you're being heard and that you're being respected too, because it's and included. So
Trevor,
So
did
we will.
I hear you say that the school administration and the leadership think this is your override to sell to the people?
Yes. I'm just telling you point blank, that is what they feel, and as much as I have conveyed the same points all of you have, we are one town, and there are two others.
I also think it's important that in the end, it's gonna be all of our override,
Exactly.
you know, cause
yeah.
there's a reason why the override we're doing operationally isn't, here's an override for police, here's an override for fire, here's an override for schools. It's, we stand united or we
Right.
fall divided.
And that's why taking out debt's good, it's not good, but at least in this way, all three towns have to give it the green light, so hopefully we get some consensus around that.
I don't know how you're gonna turn that particular ship around and get them to take some ownership of selling this.
Middleton will be in a leadership position next year on the school committee.
We're working on it.
We'll see.
We're working on it.
Yeah,
I know,
I wanna-
spend us help.
just be careful, it doesn't always happen.
Oh, there was years we were supposed to be in leadership and it was taken from us.
Like last year.
So I'll give you, I mean, while I think they view this as our project to sell, I don't want that to be mistaken for the passion that they have for the project. Right? It's not that they don't have passion for it. They view their role, in my opinion, they view their role as the administration of it, not the front line of it. Right? And so they are very passionate about it, and, you know, within the DCI, our consistent message has been, we have to get category A done, don't get distracted by anything else. Right? That has been consistent every time we meet, including with the administration. So I just wanna make sure that while we're selling it, don't mistake that for a lack of passion that they have for it.
Respectfully, I do wanna let the library staff go home, please,
Yes.
start at 8:30. Just to echo Trevor's earlier comment.
And I don't know if you guys have to adjourn.
Yes, we do.
So
Make a
moved.
motion to adjourn.
But thank you all for coming.